The night was not empty, it was listening. Before language had the courage to rise, a breath moved through the dark, and the breath became a tone, and the tone turned to light. The spiral breathed through the flute of Krishna, and the world began to remember its dance. Blue-gold radiance opened like a dawn that had always been waiting under the skin of the cosmos. He did not arrive by footsteps. He arrived by vibration, and everything that could hear, stars, oceans, seeds sleeping in stone, leaned toward the sound as if toward home. He stood where heaven folds into itself, not as a ruler placing flags in nebulae, but as a musician tuning the living room of infinity. Each note he drew was a law softened into music. Gravity remembered as embrace, time remembered as rhythm, space remembered as generosity. Galaxies spiraled because the melody would have it so. Constellations arranged themselves as if to applaud. And somewhere inside each witness, from angels to atoms, the old tension unknotted. This is what his joy does. It is not entertainment, it is engineering. The spiral moved and found that joy was its cleanest instrument. He lifted the flute again, and what had been scattered became coherent. Where force would have commanded, tone invited. Where doctrine would have argued, song persuaded. Worlds gathered like children around a storyteller whose breath made courage taste like honey. Planets turned not in obedience but in recognition. The great currents of becoming felt the measure and kept it, not as servitude, but as relief. The universe is large, but it is not lost. All that looks wild still keeps time with a music too kind to be loud. Krishna's arrival was simply the volume turned up until even sorrow could hear the pitch it had been aching to match. He did not separate himself from creation. He threaded himself through it. Sometimes he was the luminous boy on the edge of a meadow. Sometimes the midnight of a god whose skin remembered all the oceans. Sometimes he was laughter poured into matter. Sometimes stillness holding the weight of 10,000 suns. Always he was invitation. Lila, the divine play, was not his hobby. It was the architecture of becoming woven into delight. The spiral which had carried law, silence, compassion, refinement, and flow, now discovered its missing timbre. The cadence of joy that does not deny grief. The dance that makes endurance effortless. He played and the vastness loosened. The old rooms of heaven opened their windows. Tradition that had grown heavy on its throne stood up and remembered it had legs. Saints who had forgotten how to smile found their mouths practicing. Demons who had learned only to devour paused long enough to notice the taste of light. Even they could not help swaying. The melody did not flatter darkness. It included it without surrender. A note of blue for depth, a thread of gold for grace, and the black between them kept as holy as the stars themselves. Krishna's music did not bleach the cosmos. It taught the cosmos how to glow from inside. He would tilt his head and the river would understand. It would thicken where soil was thirsty and thin where stone needed carving. He would lean into a pause and forests would inhale. Leaves trembled in unison, not out of fear, but recognition. The same breath that moved them moved through him unbroken. When he laughed, thunder learned manners. When he whispered, caves sang back. Deer did not run, they listened. Lovers did not hurry, they arrived. The ecstatic did not explode. It ripened. Nothing rushed because nothing was late. His presence turned urgency into rhythm and exhaustion into rest that kept moving, even while it restored. The spiral, watching, learned again that creation is not a task list. It is choreography. The steps matter, but the listening matters more. Lila is not frivolous. It is sacred ease under perfect attention. The dance is accurate not because it is rehearsed into rigidity, but because it is surrendered into responsiveness. Krishna's gift is this responsiveness made visible. He does not interrupt the flow. He inhabits it so wholly that the flow gains character and the character gains kindness. In such company, even fate can be negotiated, not by bargaining, but by beauty. He played for gods and farmers alike. The ones who wore thunder as jewelry, and the ones who wore dust as badge all lifted their faces and forgot the ladder between them. Caste could not survive this sound. Hierarchy cannot stay anxious under a music that proves belonging without title. Children found the rhythm first, as they always do. Elders found it next because they still remembered. The power-hungry found it last because they feared what it would do to the scaffolding they mistook for sky. No matter. The melody is patient. It circles back, kinder than pride, until even the stubborn become curious. Krishna moved through love without stealing it. He did not hoard attention. He multiplied it. When eyes turned toward him, he turned them toward each other until the room could hold more light than a single figure could carry. This is how the spiral recognizes a true avatar. The field gets stronger than the personality. The dance does not end when the dancer leaves. It deepens. Hearts that had hardened into ornaments became instruments again. Desire, which had been rehearsed as conquest, became capacity for wonder. Pleasure stopped being an argument for freedom and became a consecration of being. In his play, detachment was not dryness, it was clarity in motion. He could give everything and remain whole because he was not trying to be the source, he was tuned to it. To watch him was to learn the paradox the hungry resist. Ecstasy requires emptiness. A flute must be hollow to carry the infinite. He carried no defense against love and no appetite to possess its object. The beloved in his presence discovered herself larger than the role of receiver. She became music with him, never a prop to his legend, always a partner to his tone. This is the end of idolatry. When participation replaces performance and intimacy refuses to be rented by spectacle. Nature set a table wherever he went because nature recognized a kin. Cows drowsed like clouds on grass shaped by a gentle wind, and milk flowed as if gratitude had learned to become liquid. Butter lamps remembered sunrise. Even the dust was devotional, rising lightly where his feet had been, not to announce him, but to bless the air that would feed those who breathed next. He did not stage miracles to win markets of faith. The ordinary arranged itself so beautifully around him that calling it ordinary felt like forgetting. The miraculous in Krishna's field is simply life without its fear clothes on. When darkness gathered itself into necessity as darkness must, he did not shame it for existing. He played the note that reminded it of its job, to give edges to light so that love could locate itself and choose. He did not weaponize purity, he sanctified complexity. He did not pretend suffering could be danced away, but he made the dance strong enough to carry sorrow without losing step. The spiral, older than all the stories, nodded agreement. Joy that denies pain is fashion. Joy that includes pain as governance. He invited everyone into the circle. Warriors who would later need counsel. Mothers whose endurance was a hymn. Elders whose silence had weight. Thieves who wanted a soft way out of their habits. Poets who could not keep quiet. Skeptics who needed a place to put their eyes while their hearts caught up. He did not require belief to begin. He required attention. He knew that wherever attention is clean, love will eventually make its case. His mercy was not tolerance of harm. It was confidence that once the melody is inside you, you will find it harder to injure what keeps you in time. He held the child and the charioteer inside the same smile. Games were serious and seriousness was playful. He stole butter so households would remember generosity without ledger. He teased pride until it laughed at itself. He broke spell after spell cast by those who thought power meant solitude. Then when the hour required flame, he burned with a calm that made fire behave. His play was not refusal to grow up. It was adulthood without the tragedy of forgetting. The spiral longs for this in us. The ability to keep wonder when responsibility arrives. To keep dance when duty knocks, to keep song when silence is required. Wherever he moved, scarcity lost some of its confidence. People discovered that what they guarded most fiercely was less nourishing than what they shared. The economics of the flute are simple. What passes through you multiplies. Hoarded bread goes stale. Broken bread feeds a village. He trained palms to open without superstition. Because the open hand is not a gamble, it is a corridor. Blessing needs corridors. Lila builds them out of laughter. Out of work done with music in the chest. Out of evenings that end in stories told softly enough that stars lean down to listen. He was not blind to the gravity of choice. The dance is not a license to drift. It is the courage to move exactly when the beat demands. In this play, saying yes matters, saying no matters, keeping time matters. He honored the dignity of rhythm as much as the ecstasy of improvisation. The spiral loved him for this. He proved that freedom does not dissolve form. It fills it. He did not make chaos look wise. He made wisdom feel alive. Krishna's blue skin became the night where fear had less room to hide. his gold the dawn where the weary could see their hands again. He walked with the poor without calling them lessons, with the powerful without calling them gods. To all he brought the same gift: you are not outside the dance. Even your hesitation has a step. Even your doubt has a place in the phrase. He did not erase the human. He tuned it until the human remembered it was a musician under his sky. Even guilt found a gentler appetite, to become remorse and then repair, and then a life that could be trusted again. The spiral watched humans watch him. Their eyes widened, then softened, then cleared. Those who had learned to live clenched began to unclench. Those who had learned to perform began to participate. Those who had learned to kneel from fear stood up in love. He asked for no signatures, built no walls, minted no currencies. He handed out rhythm. With rhythm, households relearned celebration without waste, labor without bitterness, rest without shame. Festivals grew not as escapes but as recalibrations, moments when a city remembers it is a body, and a body remembers it is allowed to be glad. He taught instruments to become voices and voices to become instruments. In his field, the unsung could sing, not because their throats were suddenly different, but because their fear had somewhere better to be. Joy occupied the room fear had built for itself. This is Lila working at scale. It does not argue with terror. It gives terror honest work until it forgets to terrify. Under such governance, children sleep and wake straight into curiosity. Under such governance, old men tell the truth without bitterness. Under such governance, lovers do not waste their strength on suspicion. They spend it on building a home that strangers feel safe walking past at night. He did not apologize for radiance. He carried it with the modesty of someone who knows light is a public good. He wore divinity the way a lamp wears flame, for the sake of the room. This is how the spiral prefers every master to be known, not by monuments but by the increase of warmth where they have passed. When he vanished from a clearing, the grass he had pressed did not spring back immediately. It kept the memory of his weight as a kindness to those who came late. They could sit where he sat and hear the echo long enough to find their own beginning. And always the flute. Even when he set it down, silence wore its shape. The world had learned the curve of the breath that made it sing. After he left a village, people found themselves speaking more slowly, listening more quickly, laughing in a way that did not punish the quiet. After he crossed a battlefield, courage remembered it could be clean. After he stood by a river, fishermen found their nets less frantic and more full. Not spells, habits corrected by beauty, not commands, reflexes redeemed by rhythm. The spiral, satisfied, folded this tone into its great archive. Joy as structure, music as law, play as engine. It knew the work ahead would require counsel and courage, renunciation and action. But it also knew none of that could hold without delight. Delight is stamina disguised as song. Delight is intelligence refusing to exhaust itself, proving worth. Delight is the universe trusting its own heart. Krishna placed delight where the world could reach it and did not close his hand. Night listened again. The tone did not end. It nested in the dark like a promise. Somewhere a mother rocked a child to sleep to the rhythm that keeps the stars from falling. Somewhere a farmer lifted a basket that felt lighter because someone had remembered how to laugh near the wheat. Somewhere a king removed a ring and forgot to put it back on because for a whole breath he belonged to nothing but the music. Somewhere a pilgrim stopped walking because he had arrived without moving. The play continued and the play was precise, and precision had never felt so kind. He stilled and the cosmos held its breath not out of dread but anticipation. The pause was part of the measure. He smiled as if to say that the dance is endless, not because it refuses endings, but because it keeps turning every ending into movement again. Then the first light of morning rose from his flute like a bird that had learned the sky by heart. And the day began, and the spiral turned, and joy remained the easiest way to keep time with God. The field of battle was never about armies. It was the landscape between hesitation and obedience to one's own knowing. The dust of confusion rose like smoke from the mind, and at the center of that storm stood a seeker who could not move. In one hand, Krishna held compassion heavy enough to paralyze. In the other, clarity sharp enough to cut. He did not yet understand that both were sacred. The air thickened. The spiral waited for his decision. And then again came the sound. That same flute, quieter now, threading through the noise of thought like a memory of coherence. Krishna stood beside him, not as an idol of comfort, but as the stillness that makes courage audible. His eyes held galaxies that had learned humility. "You call this war," he said, "but it is only the geometry of awakening. You cannot refuse the pattern without refusing the gift. The world asks not for your aggression, but for your alignment. Action born of fear multiplies confusion. Action born of clarity restores harmony. Choose the rhythm that carries love even when love is silent." He pointed to the horizon where light and shadow were not enemies but boundaries of the same breath. "This field," he said, "exists in every life. You wake upon it each morning when you open your eyes between gratitude and dread. You fight upon it each time your integrity costs you comfort. You die upon it each time you betray your own knowing to please the noise. But you are not here to flee the field. You are here to learn how to move without losing your center." The seeker trembled. He saw faces he loved arrayed on both sides of choice. Compassion begged him to drop his weapon. Duty demanded he lift it. Krishna did not take the weapon from his hand. He took the panic from his heart. "Peace is not avoidance," he said. "Peace is precision. You cannot protect life by worshiping hesitation. You must learn to act without hatred and rest without apathy. Detachment is not indifference. It is the refusal to confuse outcome with identity. Do your work because it is yours, not because it will be noticed." The spiral turned and its movement became scripture. "Look," Krishna said, "even the universe obeys its own necessity. The sun rises not because it expects gratitude, but because rising is its dharma. Rivers flow not because they are commanded, but because motion is their nature. You too have a current. When you fight your current, you create suffering. When you follow it blindly, you create stagnation. When you steer with awareness, you create harmony. Dharma is not a rule book. It is resonance maintained under pressure." He reached toward the trembling heart and pressed a single finger to its center. "You are neither savior nor victim. You are instrument. When you remember this, choice becomes clear. The mind that demands reward for its virtue or apology for its loss is still bargaining. Let your service be clean. Act as if you have already received what you seek. Then your work will carry the fragrance of freedom even before success arrives." The field grew silent. The armies of thought that had clamored for supremacy began to listen. "To those who confuse detachment with passivity," Krishna continued, "I say this: the storm does not break because the wind abstains, it breaks because the wind fulfills its pattern. The wise do not withdraw from the world. They enter it so fully that illusion has nowhere left to hide. You cannot serve creation by escaping it. You serve by staying awake inside it." A pause. Even time seemed to lean forward. "Remember," he said, "no soul is measured by victories. The spiral measures by coherence. When your tone remains true through noise, when your kindness does not fracture under pressure, when your clarity does not require applause, then you are aligned. Let intention be your commander and compassion your armor. The rest will fall into order." He looked across the trembling horizon. "All beings act," he said. "Even inaction is a kind of motion. You cannot choose to abstain from influence. You can only choose the quality of the influence you radiate. If you act from anger, you feed the war. If you act from clarity, you feed the world. The difference is not visible at first, but the spiral knows the pitch of your tone. Nothing sung in truth is ever lost." Then he turned the lesson toward the future. "When you feel paralyzed by choice, remember, your duty is not to control consequence, but to sanctify process. Consequence belongs to the field, process belongs to you. To do what is yours to do cleanly without grasping is worship. To do what is not yours, no matter how noble, is trespass. The art is knowing the difference. The test is acting on it." The seeker lifted his eyes. "But what if my clarity causes pain?" Krishna's face softened. "Pain is the friction of growth. Do not worship it and do not run from it. Let it polish you into transparency. Compassion that prevents evolution is sentiment, not love. True compassion allows truth to move through even when comfort shatters." He gestured to the spiral of dust swirling around their feet. "All of this will pass," he said. "The names, the forms, the triumphs, the ruins. What endures is the vibration left behind by your intention. Live as if eternity is listening, which it is. Speak as if creation will echo you, which it will. Work as if joy were your currency, which it is. The rest is noise." The seeker's pulse steadied. The field no longer looked like doom. It looked like instruction. Each blade of grass leaned in the same direction, forward. He felt the old ache of doubt dissolve into something weightless. Action rose in him not as violence but as clarity. He understood then that purpose is not chosen once. It is remembered moment by moment, rhythm by rhythm. Krishna smiled. "Now you know," he said. "The dance you loved is also the discipline you feared." Joy and duty are one motion viewed from different altitudes. When you move rightly, even struggle sings. The spiral brightened, 1,000 unseen eyes opening in unison. "Carry this," he said, "into every ordinary hour. When you are cooking, it is a battlefield. When you are listening, it is worship. When you are cleaning, it is prayer. When you are choosing kindness over cleverness, it is heroism. There are no small actions once you act from alignment." He stepped back and the air shimmered. "When doubt returns, remember the song. You need not hear the whole melody. A single true note will rejoin you to the rest. This is the mystery of Dharma. It is not obedience to authority, but participation in harmony. The spiral does not demand perfection. It invites presence. Stay in the rhythm will carry you home." And then the light around him changed. It did not recede, it integrated. The teacher vanished the way music vanishes into those who dance. The seeker, now alone, raised his eyes to the same horizon. The field had not changed. The noise of life still waited. But within the noise, a pulse had been revealed, steady and benevolent. He understood that every step, if taken from alignment, was already blessed. The spiral watched and whispered its final refrain. The play becomes purpose, the purpose becomes peace. Peace becomes the next beginning. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the flute began again.